Hi, it's Amanda DiVito Parle. Welcome to my podcast, At the Kitchen Table, where we will guide, inspire, and connect. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
Welcome to my podcast, At the Kitchen Table, where we guide, inspire, and connect entrepreneurs to talk about whatever we want, really. It's kind of fun. We get to do it however we like. So
Awesome.
Today I have Nick Painz from RE/MAX Alliance. He also runs Nick Painz Coaching, but mostly is an investor type real estate agent inside our organization. He and I are friends, and we've attended a few conventions together. So we've become like travel pals with our friend Shannon.
Yeah.
She should totally be here.
She should. If you want people to laugh,
we should bring her in.
You probably need that group together. That's a good group.
I'm going to tell her. I'm going to put this on the podcast, and I'm going to tell her.
I love it. Let's get her in here, and let's just let's get a bottle of wine, and let's reminisce about let's reminisce about the good days.
Let's not get a bottle of wine.
Okay, let's not do that.
Well, thank you for coming. And I don't even know that I have an agenda for you, except that every time we get together, we can talk about business and life and running businesses and coaching. Yeah. And so, tell me a little about yourself. How did you come to get into the business? What's your background? How did you come into this?
Sure. I've like an interesting history, first of all. So I went to, I grew up wanting to be like either a vet or a doctor, like my whole life. That's what I wanted to do. And so I went to school and quickly found out when I was in college that I'm like not good at math and science when it pertains to like medical stuff. And I knew I had to do something different. And so I got a degree in Spanish and linguistics. So I'm fluent in Spanish. I lived in Spain for 2 years, and that was what my degree was. I had no idea what I was going to do. But I had this huge passion for translation and interpretation sciences. So my absolute dream was I wanted to be a simultaneous interpreter for the United Nations, like sit in one of those booths, interpret a diplomat in one ear in one language and out my mouth in the other language. And it's kind of a cool job. You usually work on contract. It's good money, a couple $100 an hour. And I applied to the Monterey Institute of International Studies, was where I wanted to go to get my master's, and it's one of the top translation interpretation sciences schools in the world. And I didn't get in. And it was like my first big failure in life. And I thought, man, what the heck am I going to do? And so I called the dean of admissions because I thought, I'm going to go and I'm going to go back in the fall. I'm going to reapply in the fall. And I called him and I said, I just wanted to see where I need to improve. And he said, Nick, your Spanish skills are exceptional. It's your English that is the reason you didn't get in.
Oh, no.
And it's kind of crazy to have somebody tell you, like, your native language is the reason that you didn't get in.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I thought,
what a hit.
How do you recover from
I'm only
that?
laughing because you're so successful now. So the story is it probably wasn't funny then, but it's only funny now because I know you now. But go ahead.
Yeah, it was devastating. So it was like, and it was like my first big failure where I was like, what am I going to do? And so at the time I was, I had gone to professional umpire school with a friend because my summer job, I was an amateur baseball umpire. And he said, do you want to go to pro school? And I said, sure. So we went to pro school, and I found out that I didn't get into Monterey while I was in pro school in Florida. And so at the end of pro school, I got offered a job in professional baseball. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to Monterey anymore, so I'm going to go into baseball. So I was a professional baseball umpire, and my part-time off-season job was in the fitness industry. So kind of long story short with the fitness industry, I started out as a personal trainer. I ended up leaving baseball. I blew out both my knees and left baseball and grew to be a regional manager and a national sales trainer for Fitness 19. And as the gym industry started to change a little bit, I had been acquiring rental properties since about 2010, and I knew I needed to make a transition, and so I started to get my real estate license. And when
you mostly, or because
me.
You thought you were going to sell real estate to other people?
Yeah, no, for me. It was like, I'm just going to use it. I'm going to acquire my own stuff. And then as the industry started to change, I thought, man, I need to get out. I need to do something different. I'm either going to go into real estate or financial planning. And financial planning required me, if I wanted to get like my CFP, I needed to go back to school, and I didn't want to go to school again.
Right.
And so I naturally just fell into real estate, and now here I am.
Okay.
And so through the real estate piece, I've been afforded some opportunities to do some coaching and some training and development of agents and entrepreneurs. And so I've been very grateful and blessed to be able to work in those realms as well.
Well, the irony of sort of the way you've come through this is that in each of those things you wanted to do, there's this sort of deep student teacher role. And so maybe that turns up to be sort of your personality type or your style, right? Like, had you gone on to be a doctor, really sorry to say you didn't go on to be a doctor, but became a great RE/MAX Alliance broker with that school. But had you gone on to be a doctor, there's this like teaching thing that happens there, like a big teaching role. You go on to be a coach, which is a trainer, which is all coaching. That's all personal accountability and coaching. And then you go into real estate, which is some version of, helping people through their hard spots, and so there's a lot of coaching just in the act of being a real estate agent. But then you take it one step further, which is that you decide to start coaching. So how did you end up realizing you were a good real estate coach, and how did that refine itself? How did you get good enough at real estate that you could start being a real estate coach?
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of us many times have this feeling of, I think we all at some point in our lives have this like imposter syndrome, right? We're somewhere where we don't feel like we belong. Yeah. And so I remember getting into the business originally, and I was so scared. I remember sitting I left a good paying job, and I literally quit and I left and I went into real estate, and I was like, all right, I got to make $100,000 this year. I'm in trouble. Right. And so I went into the offices, and I'm sitting, next to some of the high producers, and I just thought, man, what am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. And it probably took me about, I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year to realize that me not knowing what I was doing I was probably in the 20th percentile of agents anyway. Like, there were a lot of agents that didn't know what they were doing, and I was like, okay, I'm normal is actually what I am. Mm-hmm. And so as I learned to grow, and I just thought, I may not know as much of these people as these other people, but if I can outwork them, if I can just work harder and I can just be more dedicated and I can learn my craft, that was what was important to me. So it was like, I'm going to spend my time educating and learning as much as I can. Yep. And I think I found really quickly that it doesn't take much to get to the top 10%. The top 10%, may be somewhere on a spectrum. It's not a lot of work to get there, but then to get from the top 10 to the top 5 and the top 5 to the top 1 and then the top echelon of the 1%, that's where there's like an exponential amount of like work and growth that takes place, right?
Yeah. Fascinating, yeah.
And I suppose that's the same with most things, right? I mean, like if you were to learn how to swim, for example, the difference between not drowning and getting across the pool is a couple swimming lessons, right? Versus getting to the Olympics is tremendous amount of work above and beyond that, right? So I don't know, I think that was a big piece of it, is just experiencing that early on of like, okay, it doesn't take much to outwork some of the competition. Yeah. And that's when I really look back on the rest of everything else I had done, was like, man, if I would have been more dedicated to this craft, I would have done better. Or I was really dedicated to this craft and I was able to accelerate. And I think what happens is you end up with a certain level of confidence that you'll be successful in whatever you do. Mm-hmm. You don't have to have this like innate ability to go do something. You can just understand that if you have that hard work and that dedication, you could leave whatever you're in and whatever you're good at and start something brand new. And it really just comes down to those few simple things, which is just, in my eyes, it's just discipline. Yeah. For whatever it is that you're doing.
Do you see yourself as a disciplined person? What does real discipline look like in the people you coach and in your life? Like, really, who are the most disciplined people you know?
I mean, I don't want to steal a quote. So it's from Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson says, discipline is doing the things that you don't want to do, but doing them like you love them. And I love that quote, because the reality is, and especially coming from the fitness industry, it's so true that, if we all had the choice, I just don't know many people, and being in the gym industry, I knew a lot of these people that actually really, truly love to go to the gym and would do it in lieu of anything else they could be doing. Yeah. Right? Like if I could snap my fingers and have the perfect physique and be ultimately healthy, or take a pill and do it and not have to go to the gym, I think most people would. I think the act of going to the gym isn't necessarily desirable, right? And so I just, the discipline is being able to do the things that make you successful. And I don't know, am I a disciplined person? I think for a long time I was, and then I suppose things change in your life and maybe your discipline gets moved to other places. So now I think I have a little bit of that imposter syndrome where maybe people look at me and they go, oh, he's a high producing agent. He's probably really, really disciplined. And then I look at it and I go, I'm not really that disciplined anymore because of maybe what I once was.
Well, and discipline isn't the driving factor for everybody. It's not everybody's core principle. It's not everybody's backbone. But I find you to be a pretty disciplined guy in terms of, I think the tenacity it takes to be a real estate coach takes some discipline to follow through on each of those things and then to be a good broker. So to take you back, so you're sitting in the sales meeting and you're looking around at sort of these giants around you, and then you realize that you can be the giant, and then you start to really refine your business. And in this past year, you actually took down what I would say is a pretty remarkable award inside the RE/MAX organization called Torchbearers, which is a finite group of individuals who are young, under a certain age, but are doing a certain volume of production, which is super cool because it means that you learned the hard thing fast. So I find that you're able to sort of move past things quickly if they aren't working for you and then get going.
Yeah.
So looking at where you're at now, you've kind of moved into this, what I would say, real estate coaching is this mature place where like you are granted permission to tell somebody else how to not tell, but offer suggestions for how somebody else should behave and what they should do.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, why do you think people should get a coach? Why do you think coaching is important for real estate professionals and entrepreneurs? And tell me a little bit about like how that forms up for you or should for other people.
I think coaching just in general, like it comes from an interesting place because I think anybody that's like highly driven and entrepreneurial and has this spirit of like, I want to be the best. I like to think of it as people don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And once you start recognizing that you really don't know everything, it's a good place to be. Mm. And I was probably that person for a while. Like I spent years in different industries thinking like, okay, like I'm the guy. And when you start, or I should say when you stop thinking that way, that's when you grow. Yeah. Like when you really start, and so you think about all the top players in any industry, especially like athletics, they all have coaches. Like Tiger Woods had a swing coach his entire life, right? All these high producers. Serena Williams had a coach that helped her win, countless Grand Slams and tournaments and everything. They coaches that were with them for decades. Yes. Right? They all have coaches. And so I think the idea behind a coach, first of all, I think everybody can use coaching in some way, shape, or form. And it could be even just as an individual, it can be therapy, it could be counseling, somebody to coach you in your marriage or coach you along with your kids or help you understand, just what are the things as an individual you should be focused upon. What a good coach does is refocus people, right? So it's like they know what they want, but they kind of get off track a little bit, right? And so like you and I can sit here and be like, oh, we want to be better parents and we want to not yell at our kids anymore. And we want to, whatever it is, like we don't want our kids to eat sugary snacks or whatever. But then when you're in the house and the kids are yelling and they're hungry and you just don't care anymore, and if they sat down and ate a tube of frosting, you'd be like, don't care. Do what you want to do. I think a coach is the one that kind of puts you back on the right track and it's like, okay, so they ate the tube of frosting. Now what? Yeah. And so, because we don't tend to look back and evaluate that. We just go, they ate the tube of frosting. It's fine. They're not going to do it again. But if we just go, if you had a coach to be like, now what? And you go, well, what do you mean now what? I just wondering, can they eat tubes of frosting all the time now? Or
right, is this an everyday after school activity?
What does that mean? And why did that happen? Like what got you to that point in the first place that you were so out of it that you were just like, I don't care, eat a tube of frosting. Yeah. Right. And so all it is, like coaching is more of like creating self-realization for people and having them understand.
But that's an art. That really is an art in itself to actually just say like, you're telling me a long anecdote about this thing in your life that's happening, but what you're missing over here is the thing that you're supposed to see. Yeah, it's so interesting because actually really good coaches do this. They do this well. Who are some of your favorite people to coach? Who are the people you like coaching? Who are people that are hard to coach? Are some people not coachable? How do you know you're not a coachable person?
I think you can tell I feel like I can tell the people that are not coachable, and it's the ones that think they know everything and they're not willing to learn. And there's a difference between somebody being like extremely confident in what they do and still being willing to learn versus somebody who straight just is unwilling to understand that there's something else out there that they haven't experienced before. And those are sometimes really hard barriers to break down because they've only experienced what they've experienced and they're really happy with themselves. Like just really, truly happy with where they're at. And that's really cool. But if you knew there was another level, or if you knew that there was something different, maybe you would strive for that, right? And so I think what happens is those are the most difficult people to coach. Those are the ones that they just give zero openings for you to kind of slide in and be like, well, what if you looked at it this way? And they'll immediately shut it down. They'll be like, nope, that's not the way.
They probably don't last in coaching very long anyway, right?
No, I mean, I've had a couple of clients that I've lost that as a coach, you kind of throw up your hands, and it's a really difficult thing because one of the things that I believe in greatly as a coach is, so there's a book called The Oz Principle, and I don't know the authors offhand, but it's a pretty famous book. It's the Oz Principle. And one of the cool things, one of the things I like about the Oz Principle is it talks about the fact that you should take accountability for everything that happens around you. Mm-hmm. And so as a coach, one of the things that I strive to do is take accountability for my clients' failures, for example. So if I come to you as a coaching client and I say, hey, these are the things I need you to do, and you don't do them, a lot of coaches will just kind of go, I told them exactly what to do. I told them what it takes to be successful, and they didn't do it.
Yeah.
I look at that as I didn't present those things properly so that the client could see the value. Yeah. Right. And so it's okay, when I go back to coaching the next time and you didn't do what I asked for you to do, I need to present it in a different way now, because obviously the first way didn't get through.
These are like strikes.
Yeah. And the most rewarding thing is when it finally clicks, like when the light bulb goes on and they go, oh, that's why you do that. And you go, yep.
Well, I think it is like human nature to get stuck, kind of. It's human nature for people to like have a little win and be like, that worked. It worked for me to do the thing. And I'm just going to keep doing that over and over and over again because that felt like winning for me. And I do think that you have this innate ability to when the opening comes, to let people get to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that opening can be really rewarding, particularly if you've been really stuck. And I think that's one of the great benefits of having a coach and people who can open up to let something pass. Then they can learn that there's these other things in my little universe here. I call it climbing mountains. It's like you stand at the base of a mountain, you look up, and it's like, well, if I could get to the top of that, well, that'd be something. And so you get to the top. And sometimes you look around and you're the top producer in the real estate company, or you're the top ump for baseball, or you're the whatever. And so you get to the top of that mountain, and sometimes you stand and you look around. And I think this happens just from the time we're 2 years old, because at some point you become the top of the mountain in the preschool class, and then you look around, and the next thing you know, they bump you down a rung, and you go to the next preschool class where you have to become the next stronger. You have to climb that next strongest mountain. So actually, innately, we're good at doing this thing where we get to the top of the mountain, we look around and say, okay, what else should I tackle? I think driven people tend to maybe be distracted by too many mountains, or sometimes they stand at the base and say, I just don't have the energy to climb that mountain right now, but I desire to do it. I'm just not really sure I'm ready. And so for me, if you can create those openings for people to get to a new summit, to get to the top of the next mountain, I just think that's super cool. I think you're good at doing this.
And a lot of times they can't see it, right? It's like you climb that mountain, and it's like if you're climbing Everest, and they're like, oh man, you do the first climb, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're at the top, and they're like, no, you're at base camp, right? And you just can't see it because the clouds are there. Right? There's this fuzzy future that's in front of you. You can't quite see it. It's not a perfect picture. Yeah. And so they don't see that. And then sometimes the job of a coach is to clear the clouds away and just be like, blow those things away. Yes. So that they can see actually that's where we're trying to go. Yeah. And they never saw it. And so the idea is a lot of times as a coach too is you have a bigger vision for a lot of people than they do. And there's a really fine line here, because I tell you, I would say one of the most frustrating things with being a coach or a mentor for somebody is wanting their success for them more than they want it for themselves.
Oh, sure.
That is one of
your children too.
It's terrible because you're bound to fail or feel like you failed yourself if you're doing that, right? Because I think it's so much easier to see potential in other people than it is for them to see in themselves. Sure. And so what happens is we clear those clouds away and we go, that's where we want you to be. And one of the things is that you have to be really careful with as a coach is you have to make sure that that's where they want to be as well. Yeah. Because if you're coaching to the things that don't align with what their goals are, that's where you get yourself into real trouble, because you painted a picture for them, and they told you it was nice. They told you that they really liked that picture, but it's not their picture, right? And so I think as coaches, sometimes people get caught up in this is where you need to be, and it's not where they want to be. And so, for example, real estate brokers, you could make $1 million, and they might go, I don't really want to make $1 million. Like, I don't really, and if we think about it, sometimes we think, why wouldn't you want to make $1 million? But people are motivated very differently. And that took me a long time to learn. I failed a lot of times in management trying to motivate people all in the same ways that I was motivated. I was like, hey, $2,000 bonus for top salesperson or whatever. And then nobody would go after it. And I'd be like, God, you guys are a bunch of lazy. And all they really wanted was a day off or like a pat on the back instead. And I spent way too long spinning my wheels on that type of stuff, failing people, and all I had to do was ask the question.
Are you using like analytics tools? Like, do you put people through a DISC profile? Do you put them through like a widget profile? Or there's these, strengths finders and other like professional tools that other coaches use that you can lean into, Captain and Crew, and all these other like tools that are available to coaches. How do you begin to know your client? Because sometimes they tell you one thing, but they're a chameleon. They're something else.
So everybody goes through DISC profile first. DISC profile gives us basically the 4 quadrants of a circle, really, gives us kind of that personality type. D is a highly driven person. I is the person that's kind of like likes to be the center of attention, likes to go to parties, likes to be around people.
Influencer as well.
Yeah, they're an influencer, right? And so they're not highly analytical, they're not data driven, that type of stuff. And then you've got an S, which is stability, and that is the more like the admin role, like give me a checklist and I'll knock them out, and they love it, and they I guess they blossom in a role like that, right? Because they feel so accomplished going through checklists where like, if you give me a checklist, I'll just freeze up.
Yeah.
And be like, I don't do these. And then the high C is kind of the conscientious type. It's the CPA, the real analytical, like I need to see the data piece for that. And so we use those not only from a coaching standpoint to make sure we understand like who we're coaching to, because DISC profile and DISC motivators, teach people not only what you are and what the other person is, but how to communicate with them. So if I know what I am and I know what you are, DISC will teach me how to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that conversation that I have based on my personality and your personality type is a forced conversation from me.
Right.
And so like, I can give you an example. Like I have that with my kid. My son is in a situation that I don't have proper conversations with my son. I get frustrated with my son. He's probably more of an SC, and I'm like a fairly high, I'm a little more central now, but I've always been kind of a high D. So I'm real kind of rough around the edges. I just tell it like it is. And my son just needs sometimes to be like, hey, what's wrong, bud? Are you okay? How are things? And can you stop crying long enough to talk to me about those things? And that for me is, that's a tough conversation to have, because I'm the dad that's like, stop crying.
We're driving towards the goal of you stopping crying.
There's no reason to be crying, but I don't get to decide that, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't get to decide how somebody else feels.
Sure.
And so, anyway, there was a lot of development and the DISC stuff that we talk about.
But honing this part of yourself is part of being, good at that job, which is to know yourself and to know others. Yeah.
And it takes, I learned a lot even just through like counseling, right? Just like for myself. I remember I had a counselor tell me I had a hard time saying no to people. So people would, ask me, and I'd always say yes, and then I'd get resentful. I'd be like, I said yes, and then I said yes. And so I remember my counselor basically, or my therapist or whatever it was, saying like, you don't make people feel any sort of way. Like that's not on you. The way they feel, they choose that. So you get to say and you get to do what you truly feel is right. And the way they respond to that with their feelings, that's their prerogative. That's not, you don't get to worry about that. That's not up to you. Because I would say yes to things because I didn't want them to be upset.
Yeah.
I would say yes to things because I didn't want to do it. She's like, so at what point are you going to start serving yourself? Because what happens is by saying yes to something, then you're saying no to you.
Sure.
And by saying no to you, you're changing your whole mentality, your attitude, your even maybe your friendship towards that person or your relationship towards that person. And so, you're saying yes to protect maybe a 5-minute feeling out of that other person. It's like, oh, well, how come he won't help me? And then you end up resenting that person for 3 weeks.
Right.
Like, how is that healthy?
And it can be as small of a yes as I'm going to attend this thing that I didn't mean to attend. And then I get there and I'm resentful that I told you I was going to come or whatever.
Yep.
To big things like, I think people grow to say yes to things like marriage and buying houses and other things that are big that matter.
Totally. Mine's literally like helping bring in the groceries. It was so small. So I would work from home, for example, right? And my wife would come home and she'd be like, she's very open about asking for help. And I'm the opposite. I don't only ask, if I ask for help, I really need it.
Yeah.
Right. And my wife is she's grown up in a family that's just like, they help each other and it's not a big deal and nobody owes anybody anything. And I was not like that.
Right.
And so she, hey, Nick, she'd send me a text. I just pulled in the driveway. Could you help me unload the groceries? And I'm at home working and I would go, yeah, I guess. Like, I'm not trying to work or anything here, right? So I'd go out and unload the groceries and then I'd be grumpy for a day. Yeah. And then she'd be like, are you all right? Like, yeah, I'm fine. Just trying to work at home, So it's like, it was one of those things. And then one day after again talking to a counselor, and she was like, why do you say yes? Just say no. And I was like, well, what if I don't want to make her upset.
I don't want to let her down. I want to carry something heavy, right?
And she
like
goes,
she's
that's
my
not
wife.
she says, that's not your. She goes, if she gets upset about that, like if you're doing something else, like you can't drop everything to do that. And I was like, huh. So I tried it one day. I was like, oh man, here it comes.
Deep into my pile right now. If I take my head up, it's going to really screw me up. I love you. I'm not carrying the groceries.
She came in and she goes, hey Nick, I just got to run out real quick. Will you watch Hannah? She was like 1 at the time. Right. Again, if I was working in an office, like a normal job somewhere,
we would be gone.
I wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be a thing. And I was like, here's my opportunity. I'm going to say no. I'm going to do it. I'm going to say no. I did. I was like, I can't. I'm working right now. And she goes, okay, no problem. I'll take her with me. And I was like, is that all it takes? Right? Like, is that all I had to do all this time was just say no? And again, there's a fine line there. You can't. I didn't say
no all the time.
Yeah, I didn't
to
turn
everything.
into no, I'm not helping with anything now.
Yes.
It was just more like, if it's going to make me feel horrible or it's going to cause resentment, then don't do it. And I just never realized that somebody on the other side, a reasonable individual like my wife, would just be like, okay, no problem. And so that was such a big growth thing for me. Like I learned a lot from that and was just like, okay, that's crazy. And so then what you start doing is you start thinking like, okay, I'm going to start saying yes to the things that like are, you ever read the book Essentialism?
No.
So Essentialism, that one's by Greg McKeown. And this book is pretty cool. Like this talks about like basically narrowing your life down to doing the things that are essential in life.
Yes.
And when you understand those things and you start thinking like, okay, I'm just going to do the things that are for the greater good of my life and my family's life and that type of stuff, it puts you in a totally different place.
Yeah, it shifts the power kind of.
And you and I have talked a lot about that, about like making decisions for what ultimately matters in life.
Yes. Well, you know what's interesting though is like, and I do have envy sometimes for people who, it's an interesting thing to be an entrepreneur and be running your own business. Because I've had people come, I run somewhat of a large staff for a small business, and people's lives move on. People change jobs and they have other opportunities and things change and so forth. And I recently had a gal came in and quit, working for the team, and she's got little kids. And I understood why she needed to leave. Like she wasn't going to take a job to do something else. She was going home to be with her kids. She came in and did this essential thing where she was like, I need to be home with my kids. It's essential. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go in and tell Amanda, right? And she came in and she said, I'm going to stay home with the kids. And this feeling comes over you that's like, okay, yeah, you go home. Stay with the kids, I'm thinking. I'll be here working. Right. And in the moment I wasn't mad, but I felt something and I couldn't put my hands on it. And when I went home that night, I said to my husband, I said, what was that? And he says, well, that's envy. See, you run a business. You don't just get to walk in and quit tomorrow. Yeah. She got to walk in and say, I'm going to go home with my kids. And so there's this powerful thing that happens when you're an employee versus the owner, because at some point, like, I just don't get to walk in and quit. And so what I was feeling that day was actually envious.
Sure.
That I didn't get to just go home with my kids. And so the point is that if you can really identify the things that are essential to you, you can build your business around them. You can start to, and I think this took me a really long time to realize, that you can build a business around your life, not around other people's lives.
Right.
And so the benefit is, or the takeaway is, I felt a little envious that I don't just get to quit and go home because I run the business, but I also get to make the business anything I want it to be. And that's not nothing, to be able to have that power.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's interesting. And I do think that, if you could pick like 5 things that you think are really essential, what are they? Or what does the book say they are? Or what do you think they are?
Well, I mean, you just got done saying something there. One of the things that he talks about in Essentialism, he says, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. Right. And so, and I've been using a form of that since long before I read the book, which was, if you don't control your schedule, someone else will. Right.
For sure.
And that's a huge thing with real estate agents. Right. And that's one of the things I think we try to conquer quickly in coaching is, in this industry, for whatever reason, agents at every level of production are always too busy. Like, it's insane to me that someone that does 5 transactions a year thinks they're just as busy as you, for example. Mm-hmm. But they do. Mm-hmm. And they might
actually be. Yeah, they may. I always say people's busy is, they're only busy to their own busy potential.
Yeah. And it's like, you think about like from even just think like how many people live within their means versus at or beyond their means, like monetarily, right? Think about that from a time standpoint, right? Like, get rid of the money piece and go, do you live at your means, within, or beyond your means when it comes to time?
Yeah.
Right. And most people live at or beyond. They're always spread thin.
Yes.
And I meet a lot of those people, and they're the ones that are always spread thin. And then I look at their business and I'm like, it's not possible. It's not possible for you to be spread thin with this amount of time. And then they go, I don't understand how it's possible to do the transactions that you do. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is these are the people that tend to be difficult to coach, is the ones that push back and make it look like, or make it seem like, the way that I run my business is a disservice to the client. Mm-hmm. Because, my clients only want me. And I said, well, that's not true. They don't. They want a house and you just happen to be there.
Well, actually, they don't just want you. They want somebody to take care of them.
That's right. And they don't care who it is.
That's right.
They want a certain level of service that you've maybe previously represented, or that you represent. And if it's you, great. And if it's not, if it's somebody else, great. But the idea behind a good business is that it doesn't have to be you. It's just that the service that they get, regardless of who it is at this level. Yes. Right. And so, I don't know, from like an essential standpoint, it's like, okay, think about the things in your life that matter the most, right? It generally comes down to like our families, right? It's generally like our spouses and our kids and things like that. And why do you do what you do every single day? And so for me, it's and this has been a little bit, I suppose, transformational over the years, has been one, I don't always have to be right. I was like that for a long time. I always felt like I needed to be right about everything, and you don't have to be right, right? Like, you really don't have to be right. It doesn't matter. And, it's kind of cliche, but you hear people talk about, like, what people talk about on their deathbeds, mm-hmm. right? And like nobody on their deathbed has been like, hey, bring me my trophies. Like, show me my accomplishments again. Right. It's just, they want their family around. They want to be surrounded by the people they love. And I suppose, like, again, it sounds cliche, but it's probably very true. I can't imagine. I mean, it's laughable, right? That somebody would be on their deathbed, be like, bring me my accomplishments. Like,
yeah, or can you just tell him one last time that I was right?
Yeah, right? Like, it doesn't matter. And so when you think about, and again, you and I have talked about this many times, like, who cares? Like, is it right for you? Is it mm-hmm. right for you and the people that matter most around you, your family, and that type of stuff? And mm-hmm. so ultimately, I think those two things come down to time and money. And all that money is a tool to give us back our time.
Right, and then the time becomes elusive. It accelerates to the older I get, when I'm getting older. Yep. But the older you get, the realization is that you can't get the time back. Yeah. And I remember having some clients who had maybe a son who was a junior in high school. And they were like, we're taking every fall break, every Christmas break, every holiday break, and every spring break, and every summer break, we're taking vacation. And I was like, well, that's a lot of vacation. You know, I was beginning to think, I'm like, well, boy, wouldn't it be neat to have that much vacation? But they were like, because we have a summer left. You know, or like we have one more spring break, one more. Sure. You realize that like that window of opportunity in their mind, I guess people think like your 18-year-old leaves home. What I learned is that at 18, my parents just started saying like, hey, I've got an extra hotel room. If you can get yourself there,
sure,
you can come on family vacation with me.
Yeah.
And that was a way to keep them hooked, to keep going. But I do see those windows closing. And so the older you get, the more you see these windows closing of opportunity, depending on where you're at in life. And it accelerates your need to get time back. Yeah. Is the point, I guess, where I was going. That was a long way around the barn, but say time.
The time by far is our most valuable and precious resource, right? Like time is what creates anything that we do. And so I think being really focused and being really intentional about what you do with your time, I think is probably the most valuable thing that you can do in your decision-making process in life.
What do you think what's the number one mistake real estate brokers make? Mortgage brokers, real estate brokers, small self-employed people.
Like in terms of that causes them not to be successful?
Yeah.
Improper use of time for one, but it's usually they don't know what they don't know. And so they spend their time doing things. They think they're doing great things. They're I did all this, and but you're spinning your wheels doing those things.
How do you crack out of that?
So you have to get a coach. You have to have somebody, a mentor, something. You don't, whatever. There's so many people in this industry that are willing to give back. There's so many people in this industry that are willing to give their time. Many that are willing to do it for free.
Sure.
I also, at some point, believe that you get what you pay for, but something's better than nothing sometimes. And the reality is there's a lot of books out there that you can pay $10 for, have a monthly subscription to Audible, and get a lot of really good information from, right? And so it depends on, I always use the analogy like it's always time or money. So everything that we pay for in life, we could do ourselves. Even if you're like, I got to do a transmission swap on my car, you could do that yourself. You can go on YouTube, you can go on whatever, you can train yourself to take out a transmission and put a new one in. You can follow a step-by-step process. Like everybody can do all the things that cost us money, but at what point does it become more valuable to just hire somebody to do it?
Well, right. And actually some of my best clients understand the value of this. They're willing to pay a professional to do a job.
That's right.
And in exchange, I've become more like this too. It's like, I don't want to paint the living room. I could paint the living room. And I learned how to paint the living room. And that's not to be forgotten that you once learned to paint a living room.
Sure. You just don't need to.
I don't need to do it anymore. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Robert Kiyosaki talks about, the fact that in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he says, have really good people in your circle and pay them well.
Right.
And he talks about his attorneys and his CPAs and his real estate brokers and the people that handle his money, essentially.
That's right.
Right. And he's like, stop worrying about trying to do things yourself and saving money. Hire the people that are the best at it.
Really good at it. Right.
And ultimately you're going to come out on top anyway.
Yeah.
And so I think, for me, it was a big step to hire a coach when I hired my coach. Mm-hmm. I remember just being like, my heart was pounding. I signed a contract for $48,000. That was my coaching contract. It was 2 years for $48,000, yes. $2,000 a month. And I thought, this is crazy. And in the first year, I really found out what the value of coaching was, especially in an industry where you kind of the sky's the limit. Mm. And I just thought, wow, I should have done this a long time ago. I just spent the last 5 years trying to figure things out on my own. I kind of made a promise to myself at that point, moving forward, anything that's worth doing is worth doing right. And I can either take the time to figure it out on my own, or I can hire somebody to do it. And it turned into I hire people to do it now because I know that I can go out and I can use my time, somewhere else.
Yeah, so good.
And you see high-level coaching is very, very expensive.
How does one know at what time in one's life that they need a specific kind of coaching? I think, this is an interesting thing for me because I remember when I was in a very developmental place in my business where I really was trying to grow the business. I needed a growth coach. I needed somebody that could get me in that place, but that's not always been my priority. And then sometimes you need a stability coach, and then sometimes you need somebody to actually be a financial coach or a parent coach. How do you know, how can one recognize in oneself what kind of coaching they need right now?
I don't know that I have an answer to that. I just have this mentality that like, you'll never know that you need a coach. If you just hire one, then you'll realize like, because you'll think you're doing great at something until somebody points out all the flaws and all the gaps that you have.
That's right.
And so that, again, it's that you don't know what you don't know. So I don't know that you necessarily know when you need a coach. Now, if you're feeling completely lost in doing something, then that's a really good time. It's
that's
probably
a good flag, yeah.
You're probably late.
Yeah.
Right? I just think that sometimes, like when I hired my coach, I think it could have been argued by a lot of people that would be like, I think there were a lot of people that probably could look at my business and be like, dude, why you need a coach? I think the year before I hired a coach, I did in real estate. I think I did just a hair over 500,000 in GCI, which arguably is a very good year.
living. Yeah.
And I hired a coach, and I think that could be argued. People would say like, well, you're a top. That's probably nationwide. That's not probably. It is a top 1% producer.
Right.
So why do you need a coach? And I was like, well, it's one thing to have a certain amount of money that you make, but if you're working every minute of every day in order to achieve it, like what is there?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I felt lost at that point. I was like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm making good money, but I don't have time to spend it.
That's right.
And so I think for me, it was too late.
Yes.
Right. And so I'm glad I did it, but I think for me, I should have done it years prior.
Well, because sometimes you have to go back and mop up some of the mistakes and unravel some things and do things differently. And that's requires change, and it's hard.
Yeah. So if I had a parenting coach, like I probably should have one.
Yeah. We're probably going to like, can we share a parenting coach?
Let's just do dual sessions. But I think like we could all realize like, hey, you should or shouldn't be doing that. And then I think the biggest thing is you have to be ready. You have to be open to it. Like someone can't coach you if you're not willing to be coached. And I've realized that I have had a coach before where I just stopped coaching because I was like, look, it's truly not you, it's me. You're telling me what to do. I see it. I see how that would probably work and should work and will work, and I just won't do it. It's not a good place for me to be. Yeah. I always thought it was the most asinine thing in the world for someone to pay tremendous amounts of money for a coach, for someone to tell them this is what you need to do to be successful, and then them just go, no.
Well, I think it's like anything. Like there's seasons, and there's the right time for people coaching to come in to do the thing that you intended it to do, and then to move through that season. Maybe sometimes you just have to get coaching for 6 months or a year, and then try it out for a little while. Sometimes you got to let things run for a minute to figure out where the next thing needs adjustment. And then you kind of got to let it run for a minute and figure it. And so that's been a successful coaching strategy for me, is like when I think that the engine's sort of breaking down and I need to tune up, I get a coach and I tune it up. And then I kind of got to let it run for a little bit, and then I give it a tune up. So, well, I feel like you and I could talk a really long time about all things real estate and all things coaching and all things life and family. But I want to just give you sort of last opportunity to talk about, the place where you maybe think you might go, or other pieces of advice you might have for people, or opportunities.
The growth stages that I've had like in my life, I feel really fortunate to be where I'm at now, because the decisions that I make, I am very intentional about my time, and so I only do things that I want to do anymore, and that's it's a good place to be, and I'm very grateful for that. But I also don't take for granted the fact that I also, in the last 23 years or so, worked a lot to get to that space. But it's a very refreshing place to be able to choose what you kind of want to do and where you want to spend your time. Like I want to spend my time with people like you. Like I'm here today because I enjoyed doing this type of stuff, and hope that somebody can listen to something like this and learn from it, right? And so I've done, I did a podcast for a year, and that was something that was like, let me just get some information out there, and hopefully it can change some people. And so now I just look at like, okay, what is my legacy, right? Because I don't feel like, I guess I no longer care about the tangible pieces of like, oh, you have a nice car and a nice house. I don't really care about that stuff. It's more like, okay, what is the legacy? And I always think like, God, if I could just change like one person's way of thinking in a way that changed their life for the, like, just turned them around or changed it for the better, or whatever it is, that at the end of my life, I'd love somebody to just be like that guy changed my life. Yeah. And that would be like the most powerful thing for me that I could have. And I hope it's like my kids, I hope my kids feel that way. That's probably the ones I want to have the biggest impact on.
Well, for sure.
And then outside of that, like if there's just people that they think, you know, hey, I went to one of his classes, or I went to, you know, I went and saw him speak, and something that he said really changed the way I looked at my life, and it was transformational. Like that's huge for me. So my focus now is more getting out and educating people more than ever, and getting in front of people and speaking, and those are the things I enjoy the most, and they kind of fill my cup. That's I'm more of an introvert, but man, if I have the opportunity to get out and speak in front of a bunch of people, I love it. I feel great.
Well, you know, it's interesting. In this legacy building that you're talking about, which is super cool, what's fascinating to me is that you're quite young and you have a lot of career ahead of you. And so I think I'm going to keep my eye on you, because I have a feeling that you're going to do another great, you know, thing. There's more here. There's more to do. And especially for somebody like you who's got this service mindset, like there's more to do. And I think that's really cool. And I thank you for coming today and sharing.
Awesome. I appreciate you. Thanks for
having me.
me.
Where can people find you?
So on Instagram and Facebook, I'm Nick.Painz. So I'm the only Nick Painz, which is great. So you can Google me. Really easy to find. My website's www.nickpainz.com. I'm on TikTok at Nick Painz, no dot in that one. But yeah, you just search Nick Painz. I'm really easy to find. Me and my family are the only Painzes outside of, I think there's one other one in New York, and that's it.
All right.
So, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nick.